Thank you, and thanks to Lithuanian Green Building Council for coming to this conference, and thanks for having me here. I'm going to touch upon something many of the speakers already mentioned, that when we talk about green building, we need to not only focus on new construction, which might be sometimes easier, but it's worth also looking at the existing buildings, because that's where the real potential is. And during my presentation, I'm going to try to look at some of the benefits that deep renovations have, look at the potential that we have, and some of the best practices, and then I'm going to ask an interesting question, and we'll get to that later, and I'm going to try to search for the answer with Build Upon and introduce you to that. Let's start with benefits, and I try to divide these into three categories that also define sustainability. And the benefits can be social, and here we talk about the health and productivity of the people that are in the building, because why do we build buildings? We build them for people. But it also goes a bit further. It goes to possibility of having new jobs in place, and also poverty reduction, and so on and so forward. And when talking about economic impacts, those might be the ones that are straightforward. Those are lower utility bills, the property value, the kind of higher rents that developers can rent their offices out at, and also the life cycle cost that is difficult to calculate, but really important. And when we talk about environmental benefits, right now we're actually a footstep away from a crucial climate change conference in COP21 in Paris. That's going to happen in December, and I think it was already mentioned as well. But buildings do account for a big part of the emissions that there are in the global scale, and those are existing buildings that we're talking about, so it's a key issue also environmentally. Let's look a little bit about the potential, and when talking about potential, I'm going to touch upon Latvia's example, but as we all three of our Baltic countries are rather similar in terms of this, and this is just looking at the multi-apartment buildings in Latvia, and we're looking at the building's age. And if we just only take the light blue, actually over there it's dark blue, but that part, which is 36 to 55 years old buildings, if you allow me to call it that, then we're talking about the kind of size that's 3 times what the state of Texas is. And that means it's a huge amount of buildings we actually need to renovate right now, because with the current rate, that is, we've established that we've renovated around 280 buildings in Latvia per year. So with that rate, we would have these buildings renovated in 100 years. Do we have 100 years on top of 55 years old buildings? No, we do not. So we need to take action and actually do it. But not only is this worrying, this is also a huge opportunity to get to work. And in order to do so, I wanted to take a step back and look at some of the things that have already been done, and been done really well. And this is looking at our world and looking at those light spots that represent the cities, and cities also represent where the buildings are. So we see the kind of scale globally we have, the chance for improvement, and also when talking about COP21 and its potential and how buildings are really important, this is what we're looking at, and this really shows where those opportunities are on the globe. And this is something what LEED has done, and LEED is, when we heard from BREEAM, LEED is something similar, only based in the US, and this is number of buildings certified with LEED existing buildings certification scheme, and that's more than 140 million square meters. So you can see that it can be done well. We just need to move forward and towards that. When looking at Latvia, and I do really wish that all these buildings were LEED certified, but they're not, unfortunately. But our Ministry of Economics, which is responsible for building sector, they're doing a really great job. They're mapping the renovations of multi-apartment buildings. Once you go to their website, you can see what has been done on each building, what are the savings, what are the benefits. For some of those, you can see more of those, for some of those less. But it's sort of a way to creating a databases for specialists to be able to have that experience, to pick up, to get connected, and to do multi-apartment building renovations really well. Let's dive even deeper and look at some of the renovation case studies. And here I wanted also to go to states a little bit, and I want to draw your attention to one residential property renovation, one office building, quite familiar, I guess, and then come back to Latvia and look at one of the students' hostels that has been renovated really well. And this is actually residential property in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's if you're talking about climate, it's rather similar than here, perhaps even more northern. So we would have the same kind of heating. And when talking about these case studies, I want to touch upon two things in all of them. I want to talk about the demand and reduction of that demand, and then I want to talk about how to meet that demand. And with this building, it already had, as you can see, it was built in 1901, but apparently at that time, even people knew that the building needs to be orientated right, and this is something what Thomas talked about when we talked about Deloitte. So this building had that benefit that it was already orientated so that it would gain solar gains in winter when it's needed, and other way around in summer. So what they did on the demand side, they reduced the demand by making the envelope efficient, by using efficient appliances, and then they met that demand by having efficient and innovative systems in place that can handle it, that can adapt, that can provide the kind of comfort levels that building users need with the least amount of energy used. And I also really like, when looking at case studies of renovations in particular, to I'm trying to slow myself down so that the interpreters can follow through, but sorry about that. And I'd like to talk about challenges. And one of these challenges, because this is a historic building, they had real challenges of meeting the historical prevention regulations. And one of those challenges was putting photovoltaics on the roof. But eventually they did manage to do it. So that again proves us that it is possible. You just have to really want it. And moving on to the office building, and I wanted to touch upon what I call the lead lab. This is the office of U.S. Green Building Council, the ones who develop and implement LEED system. So of course their office, if you look at the costs, it's $1,241 per square meter, and that's only for the interior fit out. So you would say it's rather high. But if you think about U.S. Green Building Council, its corporate sort of image depends on what their office looks like, because this is what they believe in and what they do. So you can talk again about the costs and the benefits that they have. And talking again about the demand and the supply, one of the most interesting things they did, and I think it's really inspiring in terms of, you already have a building ready for you, you can move in. But what they did, they moved their working stations a little bit, about 1.5 meters away from the windows, so that they created this corridor around the working stations. And in that way, they ensure that they don't have to cool down the area that's the closest to the windows, and that actually heats up the most. So that way they already reduce their demand by a huge amount. And in addition, in terms of how open the space is with these corridors and how connected people are, it's just additional benefit. And there are many other strategies, and actually U.S. Green Building Council is really open to telling people about them. And if you're ever in Washington D.C., you can apply to USGBC, and they will have a tour for you in their office. So I think it's really great that they're also kind of educating the society with this. And again, for the lessons learned, also USGBC stuff is not perfect. Apparently, they had issues with recycling, and what they did was they made sure that people understood what is compostable waste, what is paper waste, what is glass waste, so that and they made it fun. They made quizzes, they made interactive sort of learning sessions, and so on and so forward. So this is another thing that these certification systems do. They force you to, I don't want to say force, but they make you educate people around you, and you get sort of awarded for that, and that's really crucial. And when we come back to Latvia, this is really great experience of a really small town in Latvia where they renovated students' hostel according to the passive house sort of certification, and you can see the renovation costs go down, even though it's a full building, not just the interior. But we've reached really a great consumption. And again, when talking about challenges, they've been having issues with how the systems they designed, how can they make them work the way they were designed to, and that really takes some time to adjust. But they're in the process to doing that, and I think it's really a great way how to learn and do things better next time. This is just something I added to sort of broaden the perspective, and some of you might be surprised I put Walmart here, because Walmart in the States is not really known for being really sustainable, but I put it there intentionally for just sort of, again, touch upon the kind of scale that buildings have. And if you think about all the Walmart chains, stores that are in the States, and if you can just do a simple thing, if you just turn the light bulbs for bulbs from regular to LED, it already has a huge impact on the environment and also on jobs. But and then I also found really interesting the Powerhouse in Norway, which is pretty outstanding building, and they're sort of committed to be energy positive, and that is the kind of label you can only get after 60 years. So they have to prove that they've been energy positive for 60 years time. So they're really committed to actually work the way it was designed. And the one in London, I found it extremely interesting that what they're doing, they're having their own tree generation, so that means you cool and heat the building and produce energy on site, and they use the waste vegetable oil for that, so it's bio tree generation. And this is not a term, I came up with that, so it might be a little bit wrong, but that's the idea anyways. So we've reached the point where I'm gonna ask the question I promised. So if we know the benefits, we recognize the potential, it's huge, we have examples, we know how to do it, then why don't we renovate? Why don't we make our existing building stock better? And this is a great example. This is a building in Riga. It's actually been named the Great Wall of China. Because when you look at that, it's actually, we all know these Soviet bloc buildings, and I think there's about 5 of them in the row, so that's why it's the Great Wall of China. And I think it would be a huge project actually to renovate this one, so it's one of the greatest examples, I think. And there's, I think, 2 of these in Riga as well. So yeah, anyways, back to the question that I asked. I'm gonna try to look for the answer. It's a question not easy to answer, and maybe not even possible to answer. But I want to introduce Build Upon as a way or a mean or a tool to move towards that answer, to look for that answer. And as our moderator already mentioned, it is aimed to create national strategies for renovating the buildings. And the idea is to not only to have these strategies in place, but to have strategies in place that were made based on the views of different stakeholders in the building sector. Rather challenging again, however. We have 2 years for that, because the new renovation strategies have to be in place by April 2017. We have quite a bit of countries in place. We don't have Lithuania on board. We've been criticized about that because people in Latvia think that basically the ministries, and it's not bad, they think that we should learn from Latvia should learn from Lithuania and Estonia, and we should work together, which I support, which is why a bit later on I'll ask Lithuania to join us. But the 2 key challenges that we have built upon is, one of them is deep renovation, because when we talk about, there's a dialogue, and I'm quite embarrassed about that, but there's a dialogue in place, but at the same time it's quite logical when we talk about whether we renovate more buildings or we renovate less buildings, but do it really deep and energy efficiently. And our view is that we should do the deep renovations, because if we just do sort of insulation, then we don't meet, for example, the indoor air quality requirements, or we lock up these buildings in the simple renovation and they might never become the kind of buildings we really want to have in the existing building stock. So that's the kind of debate we're trying to strive. And the other challenge is collaboration between the stakeholders of building sector, because in some of the countries on the project, this debate is ongoing and existing, and it's working really well. But for us, it's something new. So that's what we're also trying to do. Some of the stereotypes that there are in the society, I'm not going to go into any of them. Maybe the renoviction. The renoviction, actually, the term comes from Sweden, where they're worried about when you renovate the building, the value goes up, so does the rent. So it's a real problem for its inhabitants. But one thing I want to say about these stereotypes, yes, they're all true in a way, but none of them is one and only reason why renovation shouldn't happen. So we're trying to move past these stereotypes and trying to work with them. And this is a sort of hypothesis we've set up, that the finance will be there if there's society that wants it, if there are specialists that know how to do it, and if politics at least do not sort of delay the progress. Politics and legislation, that is. And how can Build Upon help to get there? What we did so far in Build Upon, we analyzed, and this is sort of the cycle I'm going to run you through. And what we did, we analyzed the kind of barriers that there are. This is where we get to the chicken and egg question. And the chicken and egg question is really, what will come first? Is it going to be the society, its awareness, its willingness? Is it going to be skilled workers who can do it? Is it going to be finance that will flow? Or any other issues? So there's really that question, and what the conclusion that we come to during our project is that we need all those things to work together with each other. And if we will have the quality of tenders, if the procurers will know what they want, that they want to procure green buildings, that we're going to need, at that moment, we're going to need skilled workers to actually be able to do that, skilled architects, skilled designers, and of course we'll need finance for that. And if regulation sort of tries to stop this, it's never going to happen. So it's really a kind of, these things must work together. And in order to sort of overcome some of these barriers that we see, we've created a databases, and this says welcome to Renoviki. And Renoviki idea is, if you know Wikipedia, it's a wonderful database, and it's all created by us people. So this is what Renoviki is. It's a database created by us people, where we put up our initiatives that we are doing in order to overcome some of the barriers that don't allow us to renovate our buildings. And what you can do in Renoviki is you can search these initiatives by category, which you can see here, and you can also do it by country. And this is where you can see add country, and I would much encourage Lithuania to join and also present their great initiatives that our government is so proud of in Lithuania, to have them here and make sure that we can share them among European countries, and we don't have to come up with something new. And yeah, this is just sort of how Renoviki works. You can look for country, you can look for a building type, location, and then there are different categories. And some of the initiatives from Latvia that you can see right here, some of those are regulations, and one of them is a Sunshine project. It's a project trying to strive energy performance contracting, which means when you're renovating a building, you're also responsible for how the building is going to operate, because that's where your profit comes from. So yeah, a lot of good stuff on the Renoviki. So to be honest, it's not up yet, but we have it ready. We just need to polish up some last things, and it will be available to everyone, but you'll for sure find out. At least a Lithuanian Green Building Council will. Yeah, so we know the barriers, we know the initiatives. So how to get people to engage, and this is also what we've done. It's a really great tool. It's called Kumu, and this is the kind of the kind of sectors, the kind of stakeholders we've found. And this is, for example, this is the governmental sector, this is different agencies. And what we're trying to do is sort of putting a label on them and saying, how much are you supporting renovation? And in this case, we didn't put anyone as really the bad guy, so you can see that our maybe it's not really clear. So the energy companies, which are the red ones, that they are not that they're not the worst ones, even though they might be, because their profit directly relates to how much energy building consumes, which is why it's really important to have them in this debate at this point, so that they would be felt like they own the process and they are the ones who also want to do it. And yeah, so we know the people who we want to engage, and we want to really, I say questions for you, but it's really a question for every stakeholder in our countries, also on European level. What are the most crucial barriers, because we cannot address all of them. It's impossible for a single project to do so. And what are the key ones that we want to focus right now? How can we overcome those? What initiatives we need to do that? And then we get to this knowledge transfer, because we know the kind of initiatives in each of the countries, and we're able to connect the two. And we're able to bring the initiative to our country and discuss with the stakeholders whether and how we can replicate it to make sure we solve some of the problems that we're having. And this is looking at our process for the next year from 100 meters, I would say it's from 1,000 meters a few, but the idea is to create a process, not to have separate events focusing on small issues, but to create a full process that would in the end lead to the kind of renovation strategy that really encourages us to renovate our buildings, that allows you, all of you from the building sector, to put your expertise in place and actually to work on these projects. And I want to leave you with a quote that I find really inspiring, and that is talking about resilient buildings, regenerative buildings, and moving away from buildings making people sick. So yeah, I do have to leave, but I'll answer your questions if you have some.
It looks like Latvians are moving faster than we do in this.
That's not what Latvia's government is thinking.
Okay. And the fact is that we know that now there's a China wall in Riga as well.
Yeah.
But having in mind this piece of art from the Soviet Union, the question is, what do you think are the essential challenges of implementing sustainability in Latvia that organizations like yours face?
Yeah, so when we look at this question, we have to look at the whole process. And one thing we sometimes forget is we focus so much on how companies should learn how to do sustainable buildings, but we forget about what it starts with. We forget about the people who are actually wanting to build their buildings. And for private owners, it might be easier because they look at their benefits. But if we talk about public procurers, they're the ones, so let's say governments, local governments in particular, they're the highest sort of amount of the amount of buildings that they're procuring is much higher than the private sector is. So they're the ones who need to be educated on how to procure green buildings instead of regular buildings.
So this is something what Build Upon does, basically.
This is what Build Upon tries to do, yeah.
Okay. So good luck with that, and safe travels to Washington.
Thanks
again, Maija.
Thank you.